The courtroom had seen arrogance before, but never like this. Karen Daniels, a high-end real estate agent draped in designer confidence, leaned back in her chair and smirked at the man across from her, a 67-year-old Marine veteran whose trembling hands still bore the scars of war. Cameras captured every second as she mocked him for mentioning his service, laughing like his sacrifice was a joke. But what happened in the next 3 minutes would break the internet and redefine justice. Judge Judy's next words wouldn't just silence a bully, they'd end a career. Before we show you how it happened, hit that like button if you stand with our veterans and subscribe for more powerful courtroom takedowns. James Crawford had spent most of his life in uniform, serving a country he believed in even when it forgot about him. 2 tours in Vietnam had taken pieces of his youth, and another in Desert Storm had nearly taken his life. He came home decorated but also haunted, his medals polished, his memories blood-stained. Yet he never complained. He built a quiet life, married the love of his life, Mary, and worked hard to keep his promises, to his family, to his country, to himself. When cancer took Mary 8 months ago, the house they'd shared for 30 years became both a sanctuary and a wound. Every photo, every dent in the wall, every coffee cup still carried her presence. Selling it wasn't about money, it was about peace. It was his way of closing the final chapter of a love story that had defined his life. That's when Karen Daniels appeared, immaculate, smiling, persuasive. She arrived with glossy brochures and smooth words about premium service for premium clients. Her voice dripped confidence, the kind that made people believe she knew exactly what she was doing. Jim, who had faced the worst humanity could offer, didn't recognize the kind of enemy she was. He signed her contract, a standard 6% commission, $22,800 when the home sold. For him, it wasn't just a business agreement. It was an act of trust. But Karen Daniels didn't see a grieving veteran trying to move on. She saw an easy mark. In her world, empathy was weakness and trust was opportunity. 3 months passed. She posted 2 grainy photos of the house on Facebook and called it marketing. She skipped 4 open houses, ignored 11 emails and dodged 17 phone calls. When Jim finally showed up at her office, standing quietly in the doorway with his worn manila folder of questions, she didn't even look up from her phone. "Premium properties take time, Mr. Crawford," she'd said without looking at him. "You just have to be patient." But patience had always been his virtue. In war it kept him alive. In life it had taught him endurance. This time it became his burden. When he politely asked to end the contract and hire another agent, Karen's mask cracked. She suddenly became cold, legalistic, ruthless. Within a week, she sent him a letter drafted by her attorney, demanding her full commission, and an additional $8,000 in marketing fees. It wasn't just a bill, it was a threat. The letter warned that failure to pay could harm his credit, that legal action would follow, that her firm would pursue all available remedies. For a man living on a fixed pension of $2,847 a month, it was devastation. But for Jim, the true pain wasn't financial, it was moral. He had fought for a nation that promised fairness, decency, integrity. Now he sat at his kitchen table under a dim lamp, staring at the papers and realizing that the world he defended had allowed people like Karen to thrive. Still, he didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't crumble. He gathered every document, every receipt, every unanswered email, and quietly prepared to fight back the only way he knew, with dignity. Because while Karen Daniels believed she was dealing with an old man she could bully, she had forgotten one thing. Marines don't surrender. Not in battle. Not in life. And certainly not in the face of arrogance. Karen Daniels had built her entire life on appearances. Everything about her, from the shimmer of her jewelry to the way she signed her name with a flourish, screamed success. In her mind, confidence wasn't just a trait, it was armor. She wore it to protect herself from the truth that her empire was built not on skill, but on manipulation. When she received the court summons from Judge Judy's show, she didn't panic. She smiled. To her, it was just another stage. Another opportunity to perform. National television, she told her assistant, twirling a pen between manicured fingers. Perfect publicity. I'll make that old man look ridiculous, and every client in the city will see who the real professional is. Karen had no idea that this single appearance would be the beginning of her end. For the next 3 weeks, she prepared like she was running for office. She printed pages of real estate law from random websites, highlighted paragraphs she barely understood, and rehearsed her monologue in front of the mirror. Every eye roll, every fake smile, every dismissive laugh was perfectly timed. She picked out a cream-colored Chanel suit and matching heels that cost more than the veteran's monthly pension. Her goal wasn't to win legally, it was to dominate theatrically. She bragged to her friends that she would teach that TV judge a thing or two about contracts. They laughed with her, completely unaware that the woman they admired was walking straight toward a reckoning. Even as she strutted into the studio parking lot the morning of the taping, sunglasses on, coffee in hand, Karen felt invincible. The courtroom lights hit her like spotlights. The polished wooden bench, the small audience, the buzzing of cameras, it was all perfectly designed for her kind of confidence. She walked in like it was her runway, ignoring the veteran seated quietly at the plaintiff's table. Jim Crawford's posture was straight, his suit modest, his expression calm. But his eyes told a story Karen couldn't read, because she never cared to look. Judge Judy sat at the bench, flipping through a stack of papers. Her expression was neutral, unreadable. Karen mistook it for disinterest. She didn't realize that every flick of Judy's eyes was dissecting her lies. "Miss Daniels," Judge Judy began, her tone polite, almost warm. "You're the defendant here, correct?" Karen nodded, flashing a rehearsed smile. "That's right, Your Honor. And I'm confident that once you hear the facts, you'll realize this case is simply a misunderstanding." The way she said misunderstanding made it sound like she was talking down to a child. Judy didn't react, but the courtroom could feel something beneath her calm, a tightening silence, like the moment before a storm. As the cameras rolled, Karen delivered her speech about professional standards, about how some clients don't understand how real estate works. She spoke over the judge, corrected her mid-sentence, even smirked when Judy asked for documentation. Every move was perfectly choreographed arrogance. Meanwhile, Jim sat still, watching her destroy herself without saying a word. He didn't need to raise his voice. The truth had already been loaded, he just needed to let it fire. What Karen didn't know was that before she had even entered the courtroom, Judge Judy's team had already uncovered her history, ignored complaints, settled disputes, and 3 previous investigations dismissed only because her lawyers had buried them under legal jargon. Judy had seen this type before, the kind of predator who smiled while she stole, who hid malice behind manners. So when Karen glanced across the courtroom and whispered to herself, "This is going to be easy," the audience could almost feel fate laughing back. Because that day, for the first time in her life, Karen Daniels wasn't walking into a room she could control. She was walking into a trap carefully prepared by the one person on earth who saw through arrogance faster than anyone alive, Judge Judy Scheindlin. The moment the cameras began rolling, a heavy silence filled the courtroom, the kind that settles when truth and arrogance are about to collide. Judge Judy glanced up from her notes and gave a small nod to the bailiff. "Let's begin." Her tone was calm, clipped, and deliberate. Jim Crawford stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly as he placed a folder on the desk in front of him. The papers were neatly arranged, every date highlighted, every call logged. You could tell this wasn't a man trying to win, it was a man trying to be heard. He adjusted his glasses and began in a quiet, steady voice, "Your Honor, I hired Miss Daniels to sell my late wife's property. She passed 8 months ago. We had that house for 30 years. Already, Karen was shifting in her seat. She crossed her legs, glanced at her nails and sighed loudly, the kind of sigh that said she had better things to do than listen to the grief of an old man. Judge Judy's eyes flicked toward her for half a second, but she didn't say a word. "Not yet." Jim continued, "I trusted her because she sounded confident. She promised to take care of everything. But after I signed, she never returned my calls. No open houses, no updates. Just silence. When I finally reached her, she said..." Karen cut him off with a raised voice, "Your Honor, he's exaggerating. This was a normal business relationship. He just didn't understand how real estate works." The audience murmured. Judy's hand lifted slightly. "You'll get your turn, Miss Daniels. Continue, Mr. Crawford." Jim nodded and went on, his voice soft but unwavering. "When I asked to cancel the contract, she refused. Said I owed her $30,000 for services she never performed. She even sent me a letter threatening legal action." Judge Judy flipped through the file he'd provided, her expression unreadable. "You have the letter?" "Yes, ma'am. Page 4. She found it immediately. The courtroom cameras zoomed in as she read aloud. "Failure to remit payment will result in credit damage and further litigation. All rights reserved by Daniels Realty Group." Judy looked up, expression still calm. "Did you write this, Miss Daniels?" Karen smiled like she was being complimented. "Of course. It's standard legal language." Jim swallowed hard. "Your Honor, I served this country for 24 years. 2 tours in Vietnam, 1 in Desert Storm. I'm not asking for sympathy. I just wanted someone to handle my wife's house with integrity. That's when it happened, The moment that froze time. Karen let out a short, sharp laugh. The kind that sounded more like mockery than amusement. She shook her head and muttered, "Oh please. Playing the soldier card, how original." The courtroom fell into absolute silence. It was as if oxygen had been sucked from the room. A few audience members gasped. One older woman covered her mouth. Even the bailiff, a man who'd seen decades of courtroom chaos, took a half step forward, his jaw tightening. Jim didn't move. His eyes, clouded with disbelief, stayed fixed on the table in front of him. His shoulders straightened instinctively, the posture of a Marine bracing for impact. Judge Judy's pen stopped mid-motion. Slowly she placed it on the bench. Her eyes lifted, locking onto Karen Daniels like a sniper finding her target. "Miss Daniels," she said softly, too softly, "would you like to repeat what you just said, for the record?" Karen blinked, clearly not understanding the danger she was in. "I said he's playing the soldier card. Everyone does it these days. It's manipulation." Judy didn't move. She didn't even breathe for a full second. The air was so thick you could feel the pressure in your chest. Then, with the slow precision of someone unsheathing a blade, Judge Judy leaned forward. The audience could see it in her eyes, the transformation. The calm patience of a judge was gone, replaced by the controlled fury of a woman who had just watched something sacred be disrespected. "You're saying," Judy began, voice steady as glass, "that a man who served 24 years in the military, earned a Purple Heart and lost his wife, is manipulating you?" Karen shifted, realizing too late that she had crossed a line she could never return from. I just meant it's irrelevant to the contract, Your Honor." Judy's lips curved slightly, not into a smile but something far colder. "Irrelevant," she echoed, the word dripping with disbelief. "A lifetime of service, irrelevant. The loss of his wife, irrelevant. The moral decency to expect honesty from his agent, irrelevant." Karen's mouth opened but no words came out. The audience sat completely still. Somewhere in the back someone whispered, "She's done." Judge Judy straightened in her chair. "Miss Daniels," she said again, this time her voice low and deliberate, "you've just insulted every veteran who ever put their life on the line for your freedom. Every man and woman who fought for your right to sit here and call yourself a professional." Karen's face had gone pale. The arrogance that once dripped from her tone evaporated. But it didn't matter. The words had been spoken, the damage irreversible. Judge Judy's expression hardened into something the audience would never forget. The moment would go down in courtroom history, a frozen image of fury, justice, and moral clarity colliding in one perfect, terrifying instant. She leaned closer to the microphone and repeated, quieter this time, with the weight of 1,000 unspoken judgments behind her. "Miss Daniels, would you like to repeat what you just said, for the record?" For a moment, Judge Judy didn't move. Her silence was heavier than shouting. The audience could feel it, a gathering storm cloaked in calm. Karen sat in her chair, pretending not to notice the tension, the way Judy's hands rested flat on the bench like a judge preparing to deliver something far greater than a verdict. Then Karen made the worst mistake of her life. "I'm just saying," she blurted, her tone sharp and defensive, "people use their military service to get sympathy. It doesn't change the law." It was the verbal equivalent of lighting a match in a room filled with gasoline. The audience collectively inhaled. Even the cameraman's hands trembled slightly as he refocused the lens. Judge Judy's eyes widened, then narrowed. Her transformation was instant. She rose from her seat. That alone was enough to make the room freeze. She almost never stood during a proceeding. When she did, it meant the boundaries of the courtroom had been surpassed. This was now a moral reckoning. "Stand up," she said quietly. Karen hesitated, her arrogance colliding with fear. "Your Honor, I don't." "I said stand up." Karen stood. Her posture wilted immediately under Judy's glare. Judge Judy stepped down from the bench, her voice controlled but shaking with restrained fury. "You think military service is a trick, Miss Daniels? You think sacrifice, blood, limbs, lives, is some card people play when they've run out of arguments?" Karen's mouth opened but no sound came. Judy moved closer, her voice rising in perfect cadence, the rhythm of judgment honed over decades. "Let me tell you what that card looks like, since you clearly have no idea. It looks like 24 years of service. It looks like 2 tours in Vietnam, 1 in Desert Storm. It looks like a Purple Heart that means this man bled for your freedom. It looks like a Bronze Star with valor that means he risked his life while you were learning how to manipulate contracts." The words cut through the air like steel. Karen's face drained of color. Judge Judy's tone softened, but it wasn't mercy, it was precision. You mocked the blood that bought your freedom. You mocked men who bled so you could sell houses. You're not a professional, Miss Daniels, you're a parasite in Prada. The audience gasped. Karen's hands trembled. Tears welled in her eyes, but Judy wasn't finished. She turned, her gaze landing briefly on Jim Crawford. This man represents everything that is still good about this country. Honor, integrity, accountability. The very values that allow people like you to make a living. And you chose to spit on them. Karen tried to speak, her voice cracking. I didn't mean. Don't, Judy snapped. Don't insult this court by pretending you don't understand what you meant. The tension in the room was so sharp it felt dangerous. Judy took a breath, and when she spoke again, her voice carried something deeper, grief. My father served in World War II, she said, her voice steady but weighted. He stormed beaches where boys died before they hit the sand. He saw things that haunted him for 40 years. He came home and built a life, never once asking for thanks. He never played the soldier card, as you so disgustingly called it. He just lived quietly, believing he'd done his part for a world that should have been grateful. Karen's lips quivered. She wiped her eyes, but her tears weren't for remorse, they were for fear. Judge Judy's tone rose again, now carrying thunder. Jim Crawford is like my father. He gave this country everything. And you tried to take what little piece he had left. You saw his grief and turned it into profit. You saw his loyalty and twisted it into a contract. And then you laughed at the very thing that kept you free to do it. Her voice now echoed across the studio. That ends today. The silence that followed was absolute. Judy returned to her bench, flipping through Karen's papers as if dissecting her life one sheet at a time. You claim to have marketed his home. 2 Facebook posts. No open houses. No follow-up. You call that work? You call that integrity? Karen shook her head, stammering, I tried. No, Judy said sharply. You lied. Then she delivered the words that would destroy Karen Daniels completely. You will repay every cent of commission you demanded. You will cover all associated damages. And I am recommending your name for permanent suspension to the real estate board of this state. You'll never prey on another grieving family again. Karen's knees buckled slightly. She covered her face as tears streamed down her cheeks. Judy's tone remained steady, unflinching. You wanted fame. You have it now, just not the kind you planned. The gavel slammed once. Judgment for the plaintiff. The audience erupted into applause, raw, relieved, and thunderous. Karen collapsed into her chair, sobbing, her mask of arrogance shattered into pieces that would never fit back together. Jim Crawford stood motionless, eyes glistening. For the first time he didn't look tired. He looked at peace. And as the camera panned to Judge Judy, she leaned forward and said with quiet finality, Court is adjourned. If you believe Judge Judy did the right thing by standing up for every veteran who's been disrespected, comment justice right now, because this next part will leave you speechless. The episode aired on a Thursday morning, and by Friday afternoon, it had become the most watched courtroom moment in the history of television. Within hours, every major news outlet was replaying the clip. The image of Judge Judy standing tall, her voice echoing like a thunderclap as she tore down Karen Daniels, spread across social media like wildfire. By nightfall, the hashtag #RespectOurVeterans had climbed to the top of global trends, staying there for 6 straight days. Clips of Judy's speech were shared by celebrities, journalists, and politicians alike. Veterans groups across the country released statements of gratitude. A retired Navy officer tweeted, Judge Judy just gave voice to every veteran who's ever been disrespected. We salute you, ma'am. A video compilation surfaced of soldiers and families watching the clip together, many wiping tears from their eyes as Judy's words rang out. You mocked the blood that bought your freedom. It wasn't just entertainment anymore, it was a cultural reckoning. For Karen, the fallout was merciless. Within 24 hours, her clients began calling her agency, demanding to be released from contracts. The company's board issued a public statement denouncing her behavior and suspending her pending investigation. By Monday, her real estate license was placed under emergency review by the state commission. News anchors debated her arrogance on morning talk shows. Legal analysts dissected the moment frame by frame, calling it a masterclass in moral accountability. Everywhere Karen turned, her name was poison. Her social media accounts were flooded with hundreds of thousands of comments. Some angry, some disappointed, but most simply repeating one phrase, justice served. A woman who once prided herself on controlling every conversation was now powerless to stop one she had ignited herself. Meanwhile, Jim Crawford's world shifted in the opposite direction. Neighbors left flowers at his doorstep. Local veterans associations invited him to speak at their gatherings. The small house he once felt trapped in became a symbol of quiet dignity, a reminder that goodness can still win when the world watches. When reporters asked him about Judge Judy, he didn't talk about revenge or fame. He just smiled and said, "She saw the truth. That's all any of us really want." That one sentence became the quote replayed on headlines and YouTube shorts for weeks. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was the kind of simple honesty that cuts through the noise of outrage. Across America, something rare happened: agreement. People from every walk of life, every generation, and every political side came together to celebrate one thing: decency. It reminded them that justice wasn't about who had more money, or who could talk louder. It was about what was right. Karen's reputation lay in ashes, but the story had stopped being about her. It had become about what she represented, the arrogance that infects those who believe they're untouchable. And it had become about what Jim represented, the kind of quiet strength that doesn't shout but stands its ground until the world finally notices. By the following week, the video had reached 50 million views. Comment sections filled with veterans thanking Judy, children writing about their parents' service, and ordinary people saying they'd never cried during a courtroom show before. Jim watched the clip once, just once. When it ended, he turned off the television and walked to the small garden his wife had planted years ago. He knelt beside her favorite roses, the ones she used to water at sunrise, and whispered, "It's done, Mary. It's really done." The breeze carried his words through the yard like a benediction. And somewhere far away the internet's noise faded, leaving behind only silence, and the sense that for once justice had spoken for everyone. For weeks, America couldn't look away. Karen Daniels, once the face of high-end real estate and self-made success, had become the embodiment of arrogance and downfall. Her story wasn't just gossip anymore, it was a cautionary tale, studied, replayed, and remembered. The clip of her smirking in court and saying, "Playing the soldier card, how original," had turned into one of the most shared videos in internet history. The very confidence that once made her untouchable now became the rope tightening around her own reputation. Every news anchor, every YouTuber, every talk show host replayed the same line on loop. Commentators didn't even need to exaggerate, the footage spoke for itself. "The woman who mocked a veteran" became a phrase people used to describe the worst kind of pride. Karen tried to go silent, deleting her social media accounts and hiring a PR team to spin the story, but it was too late. Her videos, her interviews, her arrogance, all archived by millions. Former clients demanded refunds. Agencies that once begged her to join their teams now released official statements cutting ties. Her pictures disappeared from office walls, her name scrubbed from promotional banners. Invitations to galas, luxury events, and charity functions vanished overnight. What had once been prestige turned into poison. Reporters camped outside her gated home, shouting questions she refused to answer. Her neighbors avoided her, whispering as she passed. The woman who had once built her career on controlling narratives had lost the right to speak. Karen Daniels wasn't just fired, one journalist wrote. She was erased from her own reputation. The Real Estate Commission wasted no time. Formal misconduct charges were filed, citing fraud, intimidation, and unethical client manipulation. The hearing lasted less than an hour. Her license, permanently revoked. She was ordered to repay $80,000 in damages, not just to Jim Crawford, but to 2 other clients who had come forward after watching the viral clip. Her accounts were frozen. Lawsuits piled up like bricks in a collapsing wall. One by one, luxury turned to liability. Her BMW was repossessed, her penthouse apartment foreclosed, her designer clothes sold off to pay legal fees. She found herself sitting at the same kitchen table where she once bragged about closing million-dollar deals, only now surrounded by silence. For every dollar she stole through arrogance, the newspaper headline read, the system took 10 back in justice. In the final act of this public reckoning, Karen appeared before the disciplinary board. Cameras weren't allowed, but witnesses later said her hands shook so badly she could barely hold her statement. The confident smile was gone, replaced by a hollow stare. The board chair read the decision aloud: permanent industry ban, full restitution, and public record of misconduct. As the words echoed across the chamber, Karen's head lowered slowly, as if the weight of her own greed had finally become too heavy to bear. And that day, the narrator intones, she was hanged, not by rope but by the weight of her own greed. Her career, her pride, her illusion of control, all gone. Across town, Jim Crawford visited Mary's grave. The grass was neatly trimmed, the roses blooming just as she loved them. He placed a folded flag beside the headstone and whispered, "It's over now, love. Justice served." The sun broke through the clouds above, a single beam of light falling across the marble stone as if the world itself acknowledged the balance restored. If this story touched your heart and you believe karma always finds its way, comment "Justice served," and subscribe for more real stories where arrogance meets its end, and where heroes like Jim finally get the respect they deserve.